All right, all right, all right. We are live here, streaming. This is Tyler James with Comics Launch, and I'm excited because we have a really fun conversation that I'm going to share with you. My guest today is a writer of comic books, novels, and scripts. He's done freelance writing for Black Box Comics and Zenescope Entertainment, and also works as an editor for Mad Cave Studios. His work includes the ongoing series Black Cotton, published by Scout Comics, and the Vineyard from Aftershock, as well as some self-published crowdfunding work such as Don't Ever Blink and The Lunatic, the Lover, and the Poet. And he's back on Kickstarter this week with a new series called America's Kingdom, which is about a modern-day America under the reign and rule of a descendant of George Washington. Welcome to Comics Launch, Brian Hawkins. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Thanks for the introduction. That was cool.
Yeah, man. Well, you've been busy over the past couple of years, and your work has definitely been on my radar for a while. And I know you're sort of building a strong reputation for yourself in the comics industry for these intriguing high concepts. And so I'm excited to have you on the show.
Oh man, that means a lot. Thank you. I'm glad to be on here.
Yeah. Well, let's dive right into the current launch here. You've got a new series called America's Kingdom, and it looks like you're launching 2 issues here for it, issues 1 and 2. So, fill us in. What is beyond the sort of high concept? What's this series all about, and why is this a story that you had to tell?
So this is actually a concept that I came up with back in undergrad. We're talking like early 2000s, and there's been several iterations of it. It started off as a spec screenplay, and then I wrote that several times over, and eventually it became a comic book series that was like one of my actually first self-published comic books. And then life and editing and freelancing, and I kind of it went off to the side some while I did other things and worked on other stories, and I got to this place where, like right now, where I'm just like, I have some time, and I really wanted to focus going into 2023 on being creative, and I wanted to return back to kind of where I began, and it's an old series but new series at the same time, because it's been there, but at the same time, I've never given it the attention or had the chance to that I wanted to, and here we are now. So the concept is, it's just it's an alternate history, it's an alternate reality where America, the United States, but in this story, it's the United Kingdom. They didn't go the route of being a democratic republic. They chose being a monarchy, and it really stems from I remember in history class where we were taught that George Washington had the opportunity to be king, but he turned it down. And so in this version of reality, in history, he did not turn it down, and things just kind of happened differently.
Yeah, it's I remember the famous I think it was a Ben Franklin line where after the Constitution was written and they come out and like the press is like wondering like what's it going to be? Is it a monarchy? Is it going to be a republic? And he said it's a republic if you can keep it, which is sort of that famous line. But something that is surprising. It's like, oh wait, this was not etched in stone. And in fact, the other, like, even though he was our first president, it was also shocking in the day that George Washington voluntarily left office when his term was up. And so there were plenty of opportunities to go that route.
Exactly.
So I'm curious because you have America's Kingdom, which is, it sounds like this was a story that's been in your head for a while. More recently, Black Cotton has been out, which also is a sort of a counter alternate reality, alternative history. Like, what is it about like the alternative history fiction genre that intrigues you, and maybe what are some of your favorites in that genre, or things that have influenced this title?
Um, I think it's the idea that things could always be different, or things could have went a different way. If a different choice was made, or if because life is just, it's, in my opinion, it's cause and effect. And your actions, your inactions, and how you perceive things affect your reality. So at any point in time, that could have veered off, in the space that we're in now would not be what it is. And then it's fun to play with, well, what would be different? And of course, when you're telling a story, you can take certain liberties, and you can exaggerate it, or you can blend in certain aspects, like with America's Kingdom, like, there are swords, and there's bow and arrows and crossbows, and there's a reason behind all of that. But the idea was like, okay, well, we're dealing with a monarchy, and why not bring in some of the cooler elements, like medieval times, or et cetera, et cetera, into this modern world. But of course, you just have to make it work within the story, and make it more plausible. And I feel like that's something that that America's Kingdom, like, it has, like, why those things are there. So with Black Cotton, it's kind of the same thing. It's that social order that's reversed, and how would that affect the world? How we perceive things, how we feel things. I think it works well with just who I am as a person, and how I analyze, and how I feel, and what I want to experience. Even though I can't experience these realities, I can still, like, play with them, and experience them, like, through the story itself.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the things that's always interesting about these alternative realities is that there's, you know, they play on, the familiar, but also the twist on that. I've really
Yeah,
been enjoying recently the show For All Mankind, which sort of, like, there's and I like about these stories is that there's a common history up until a certain point, and then there's that divergent point. And so, it sounds like for this one, the divergent point is we made a different decision on rule in 1776,
yeah,
and then we go from there and play with that.
right.
For All Mankind, it's sort of it's well, what if the
I think I've
Russians
watched
got
that.
to the moon first?
I've heard
um
about that. Yeah,
and then it plays the space race out with that one different thing, but it ripples all throughout. And so part of the fun and the promise of these series is that you've got to go in and make interesting changes
hmm,
while not making it so that the world is completely unrecognizable. And
yeah,
so, like, I'm curious, like, what's the research process like for doing some of these sort of alternate histories for you? How much sort of research and how much world building is really necessary, and how much of a
yeah.
timeline do you feel like you need to have in place before you can dive in and start crafting this tale 300 years later?
That's a great question. And so I remember when I first began writing, so like when I first had the idea for it, like, I did a lot of, I went back and looked at, well, I didn't have my old textbook, but I was in college at the time. So, I remember going to the library, and at that time, it was AOL dial up. So I wasn't online,
Yeah.
uh, it was AOL dial up. That's crazy. And I, went to the library, and I just began reading books, about history, what happened in 1770s, like what led up to it, and what happened, like, after that. And so what I found myself doing is, I knew the starting point for where, from where this reality came from, it springboarded from. But the cool thing was that I wasn't going to start the story back then. I was starting a story in modern America. So that allowed me not to necessarily have to write specifically to the history. I could infuse the history as I tell the story through a modern lens.
Yeah.
And so what I ended up finding myself doing a lot was going back in certain spots with like language and certain things that I wanted to allude to. I found myself going back at those points and bringing them forward to kind of, I don't want to say mask them, but to kind of case them in what this modern world will look like. For example, there's a character in issue 2 named John Adams. And, you know, it's not the John Adams from history that we know. However, you know, the question would be like, well, why, like, who is he then? You know, why is he named John Adams? And so one of the things I try to do is use some of the names or change the names some and give you the idea that there are certain descendants that exist. So that that connection to history is still there.
Yeah, the royal houses, right?
Exactly.
The families and then the legions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that it's interesting stuff. I'm you know, one of the things though, is that, you know, America, like ingrained in the American ethos, and one of the I thought that was interesting in just the opening scene is you know, someone pulls out a gun and it's like, oh, a gun in America, you know, or a gun, but by the common people, what is this? And so I'm curious, like, how did you balance and in your world, like, what is similar about like the character of America and the people of America, and what kind of things are very different, you know, in this world that you're imagining here?
So it's kind of like it's kind of flipped on its head, but at the same time, like you're saying, you know, you're going to find the similarities. Like one is where like you have that. So it's goes around the idea that the monarchy has a stronger hold on what America or what the United Kingdom of America is. And so what you have is John Adams, and you have Benedictine Arnold. You have these similar named people who are actually rebels or insurrectionists fighting for democracy. They actually want democracy. They actually want to take down the monarchy because of the hold that this family in the monarchy has had. So you have some people who are, you know, that royal blood that's with, you know, the prince right now because he's soon to be king, which is part of the storyline. Who's with him, you know, the monarchy, and you have this division where some are like, no, like this needs to change, and here's our time to change it. The idea with the guns, of course, kind of plays into even like now. So in this reality, there's been a 10-year gun ban completely, which happened through Prince Jeffrey's father. And so when, you know, that question of that gun is shocking because you don't see those anymore. And so this rebel, this insurrectionist for democracy has the gun. And so one of the big things is like, where is he getting the guns from? And how did this get back into the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
So
cool. And so you decided to bring this series back and to Kickstarter for the first time with a 2-issue launch. So is that you know, new content and then content that was previously released?
yeah. So I'm pretty. We're pretty much ahead, like far ahead in the art. Like, so let me see. We're in art for issue 5 actually, as far as pencils. And so I had issues 1 and 2 already done. And issue 3. I'm recoloring issue 3. So it was really about trying to put more content out, and that's part of my creative pursuit going into 2023 is to put more creative content out, and like through self-publishing, through my own imprint Gnosis, just being consistent with what I'm distributing through Kickstarter.
Mm. Yeah. So I want to kind of get into that aspect of
Mhm.
things. As someone that's been building a career in comics, but also knowing that like not to rely on just one thing, one series, one approach.
Right.
You've been doing freelance editing, you've been doing some freelance writing.
Mhm.
You've got your own creator own stuff. I'm just curious, like what was your plan or idea as you first started getting into this world about like what you wanted to do and achieve, and then like how has that plan sort of shifted and evolved as sort of the realities of
Yeah.
the industry and have come, and then what are your goals now?
That's a great question. And when I first began creating comics, it really was about wanting to tell, the stories that I want to tell, my stories, and connecting with the artists and the collaborators to tell these stories. So it was really an indie approach. I do remember early on, like Image was like, that like Image, the temple. And so I did send some things like their way. And I definitely thought they were better than what they actually were, I think. So the process of that. But it was I feel like aside from that, it was really about just self-publishing, to be honest with you. Like I really didn't have a goal of writing for Marvel or freelancing or anything like that. That kind of I kind of evolved into that. So, when I began, it was just about how do I best put out these stories that I want to tell. And since then, I've been fortunate in, to connect with different people and to meet different people and to work with different people. And I've learned so much. I like I've learned so much from Mad Cave Studios, being an editor with them. It really did change how I viewed the industry, what I felt from the industry. It changed how I viewed making comics and writing stories, being their editor. And from that point, it was more freelance writing and then some being traditionally published. And so now I would say to get to that final answer. Like, while I want to continue to traditionally publish, I really want to kind of also have this parallel lane and really get back to independently telling some of the stories that I want to tell,
Mm.
where I'm in control of it, me and the creator teams, and how we put that out. And that's kind of what America's Kingdom is about for me. While I've been fortunate to do Don't Ever Blink and The Lunatic Lover and The Poet, I felt like those I still haven't been consistent to be in that lane and to have like a mode and routine for when those issues are going to be coming out. And that's because I've been doing so many other things. America's Kingdom is about me saying I'm on this road or on this path, and I want to be a contributor to this platform and to independently putting books out.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is like a new starting point for me.
Yeah, it's funny how keeping it fresh is just a part of staying relevant in the industry and trying
Yeah.
new things and experimenting and yeah, going into 2023, I think we're like I'm planning on doing trying some new approaches to
Okay.
like size of what we're launching and release schedule and sort of treating the Kickstarter market as like the first place that we're really focusing in and
Hmm.
and letting the direct market and maybe different versions for the direct market follow down the line, but
Okay.
not make that be the absolute priority. And
Yeah.
and how that's going to ripple is going to be interesting to see. Um,
Yeah. It sounds
uh,
good.
yeah, curious, like, to talk a little bit more about, in the editing role, like what are some insights that you had from doing that, and where did those come from? Was it mostly like working with other talented writers and seeing how they approach things, or was there uh, a process or a mad cave way that, like, you're like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense? Yeah, because it sounds like that was really lighting you up, and those opportunities. I'm just curious to hear a little more about that.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, like, when I was brought on to be an editor with Mad Cave, they really allowed me to develop my own style. Very interesting story is that I met them through Upwork, like, and they were looking for an editor before going into Diamond. Like, they weren't in storage yet. So, but that upcoming January, they were going to be. So they were looking for different editors, and I got to talk to, like, Mark London, all of them, and we just really hit it off and developed a great relationship. And so when I was hired to be one of the editors, I would get, like, Mark scripts, and the first thing I thought about was, okay, well, I'm a writer, but I felt immediately, intuitively, that I couldn't look at it as a writer. I had to look at it as someone outside of that. So I actually Googled, and I found Mark Wade's. He had a blog on being an editor, and one of the main things that he talked about was stepping back and supporting and serving the story and the writer. And so that really kind of just flipped how I thought about things. And from that point on, I, seeing someone else's script, you, in my mind, I'm still thinking about how I write scripts. And I just learned, like, okay, well, I see why he did that and what's happening here, and the panel structure and the feel that you get from it. So it became this science about craft, in how that script then translates to page. And so there wasn't a particular Mad Cave way, but it was the opportunity, them trusting me and allowing me the opportunity to develop my own kind of editorial lens. And then I got to work with, like, Chris Fernandez, and we would work together on different stories. And now, at the time, he was in a different role, but he's like the publisher now. But and we were, like, go back and forth and talk about scripts, like even Nottingham. Like, when I got the Nottingham script, he and I working side by side, and, like, just going over that script, and bouncing thoughts off him, and he coming back to me, and it really is about process, and the editorial process was just eye-opening for me.
Yeah. And I know you've been talking about some of your insights around craft and story on your Substack.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So what tips do you have for, like, the aspiring writer out there, or someone that, like, has, like, this brilliant, great light bulb idea or high concept, similar to the driving high concept pitch behind America's Kingdom.
Thank you.
But now they're like, okay, I've got the great idea, but how do I actually turn this into a fleshed out story?
Right,
Or,
right.
what's your process when you have that light bulb moment, but then it's like, all right, an idea or a one sentence pitch isn't necessarily a story. How do you go about putting bones on that thing and determining whether or not it's more than just, hey, here's that high concept?
Right on. So, like, I have a notebook, and it always, like, and I have so many of these, right? And I start to, like, write down loose ideas, handwritten, right? And, like loose ideas of the concept, what the story could be. From there, you're going to get probably some character names, ideas, like who they are. And everything just really is, like, loose in here. Once you have the loose idea and some things to probably connect them, it begins it's now your job to give it form. And so the form takes place in like, okay, what would the pitch for this be? I start with like a log line, and which is like three to five sentences that could tell the whole story, and in a very generic way to where I'm not necessarily saying John and Jacob did this, but like a young man goes into woods and et cetera, et cetera. The whole idea of character plus obstacle equals story. Like in my log lines, that's what I try to do every time. I taught that in English for like 17 years. Character plus obstacle equals story. So now in my log lines, that's what I use. And from that log line, I tried to then write out a summary of the story, which becomes like a synopsis. And that summary, that beginning, that middle, that end, and I'm focusing on how to tell the story in a very concise way. I want the important things in there, but I'm not going into really great detail. I'm just trying to tell what the story is from beginning, middle, and end. After that, I do this approach of it's called like a outlook, and it's basically, what is the message? Like, what are you trying to convey? Again, this goes back to me being an English teacher, like, author's purpose. In that outlook, I'm telling what my author's purpose is, which is to convey a message. So what is the message, and how are you going to go about delivering this particular message? And so you have this basically a pitch document, right? Yeah. Where you have a log line, you have a summary, which is like your synopsis, and you have an outlook, which conveys why you're telling the story, and what the story is about. From that point, you can build out, in my opinion, who your characters are. If you're going to add images of how you want them to look, or what role they will play, or how they'll look, et cetera, et cetera. And at that point, you can begin to do an outline. And for me, my outlines kind of like vary. Sometimes they're more specific to go like page 1, page 2, or page 1 through 3, like how I want to pace the story. And now, and this comes from editing, I think about like turn pages, right? And I think about splash pages, and I think about double page spreads. And so in my outline, those are the beginning concepts as well of what this would look like as a comic. It's laid out kind of in my outlines too.
Yeah. I'm curious, at what point in your process are you sort of first bringing a new idea or to someone for some feedback? I know that there's some people that like want to get feedback as soon as they have the idea and start talking to people early. And some are like, I really want to protect this and make sure that I don't present it when it's not sort of potentially strong enough to withstand like a barrage of, well, have you thought about it, or are you sure? All of that. Like, how has your approach been? Or do you lean more towards keeping your cards to your chest or getting feedback quick and early?
So I don't do a whole lot of sharing out every single thing. I do have like a small group of creators that like we have each other's phone number, right? And where I would say, hey, can I send you this to take a look at, especially when I'm feeling unsure, or when I just know like, okay, I need another set of eyes. I'll send the log line, or I'll send the log line plus the summary, and it kind of varies. It just depends on the story and how comfortable I am with the story. I will say that the pitches that I sent to Aftershock, I did have feedback from 2 creators that, I sent them the whole thing, which was the log line, the synopsis, the outlook, the whole thing, minus the outline. I got feedback from them before I sent it in. But there was a couple of pictures that I did not send to those creators. I just sent in because I felt strong about them. And selfishly, I didn't want anyone to change my mind about them. So I just went with it like that. So it basically varies. The Vineyard was that way. I didn't get any actual feedback on the Vineyard from anyone else. I just sent that one in because I felt very strong about that one.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's a good approach. And so for the anything that you want to say about the experience with either the direct market releases, working with Scout or Aftershock, and how have you been able to sort of balance and what have you found is the difference between like promoting a book that's going to come out through a publisher in comic shops versus books that are your own sort of creator owned stuff launching on Kickstarter?
So the traditional publishing market has been great for me with like working with Aftershock, working with Scout. It's been fun. It's been enlightening. Just seeing how, you go from point A to point B, point C, et cetera, and how things, have to get done, of course, deadlines, the revising, the editing process from, being a writer and dealing with other editors, how that works. But also, like dealing with the pre-orders from Diamond and Lunar and how you like promote that. And what I end up doing really, I'm on social media a lot and I'm always throwing stuff out there. But in addition to that, I would also like do like Facebook ads. And I feel like the Facebook ads really, really does help. I know like the numbers for Black Cotton 1 versus number for Black Cotton like 4. And while they normally do drop, but I didn't run any ads for 4, 5, and 6, but I did run ads for 1 through 3, and and that was concurrent to like how the number of pre-orders dropped too. And I just find across the board that is kind of how it is. So I comparing that to self-publishing or independently releasing. I tend to like to say independently releasing versus self-publishing.
Yeah.
I feel that, well, one, of course, you have more control. There's a directness, between you and the readers and the audience that I particularly love. And what's interesting is that, at least for me, I don't think that any success that I've had traditionally publishing doesn't necessarily cross over or correlate to that in independently putting books out through Kickstarter or etc. I find myself, in the independent publishing lane, learning how to create that audience, or find that audience, or to create ways to bring that audience in to notice who I am, in the content that I'm attempting to put out, which is a challenge, and it can be frustrating, but at the same time, I, especially since from Don't Ever Blink to the Lunatic Lover and Poet to now America's Kingdom, I'm learning more about myself as a creator and how myself as a creator is connected to the comic book enthusiasts and readers and other creators who are out there. And I personally find it more, I want to say more rewarding to independently put something out than the traditional ways, the traditional means, simply because of how personal and intimate it is.
Yeah, that direct connection is definitely a valuable thing, and while I think it's great to go through publishers and get that experience and be relevant on Wednesdays if that's still a thing in the comic shops, having multiple ways to put books out and know that you don't necessarily have to have the approval of a publisher or someone else that says yes to make your thing, as long as you have an audience that knows about it. And so I think it's great to be playing in all of those sandboxes. Well, Brian, I want to hit you up with the Comics Launch Speed Round. It's been a while since I've done one of these. You up for it?
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. Question number 1. Finish this sentence. Kickstarter is blank.
Kickstarter is blank. Kickstarter is great. I'm going to say great. Okay. Great. Can I say great?
Keep it simple. Sure can.
Challenging is it too. Challenging. Kickstarter is challenging.
Yeah. Great, but challenging. If you could change one thing about the Kickstarter platform, what would that one thing be?
If there was a way to maybe, I like what Substack has done with the idea of chat. If you could kind of create a chat group with your Kickstarter readers and backers, and just have this community. You have it with the updates, but if you could like have more of a direct link with like within a chat, I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, it's a first time I've heard that, but it's kind of that's a cool feature that would be cool. It was just like a live 24/7 chat going during a Kickstarter launch, where it didn't feel like as permanent as a comment that I'm going to leave on the page, and could be more informal. That people could opt into. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I think so.
What's your secret weapon? Meaning a tool, a resource, an app, etc., that you couldn't create or make comics without?
Oh, you know what? I'm gonna say Google Drive. I am such a huge fan of Google Drive. Like that Google Doc is it.
Yeah,
I do everything with Google Doc.
Yeah, Google Docs is great. I actually just had to upgrade mine because I hit another like bandwidth limit for using so much. But the nice thing about it is like, oh no, I've like sometimes it's like, oh, should I go and delete a whole bunch of stuff? No, I'll pay $1.
Right.
And there we go. It's not at least they don't break the bank on that.
Exactly.
But yeah, Google Drive is a great tool, and I don't know what I'd do without it either.
Yeah.
All right. Promotion is an area that for many Kickstarters creators struggle with. Do you have a promotion tip for our listeners who are looking to crowdfund?
The best one that I know, I say the best one I know, but the one that I use the most, I think, is impressions. I can't remember the exact number, but like a person needs to see something like an image or something X amount of times before it impresses upon them. So I usually try to stay consistent with at least putting a visual out there like 4 to 5 times a day. Just trying to section the day off though, where I'm not just spamming it, but more like it's throughout the day, so that around the clock, there's something that's from Brian that's out there that you're seeing. I feel like I got that. I feel like I got that from you.
I mean, I've definitely talked about that because you hear the occasional creator like worried, like, am I being too overly? Geico spends $1 billion a year and has like half a dozen mascots and coming up with new ones every couple of months.
Yeah,
still, like they don't seem over. Have we seen the Geico lizard too much? No, like that's how they stay relevant and stay of mind. So
absolutely.
Your extra tweet or your extra post is probably not going to be the end of the world for anything. But yeah, and that's another thing that like I think trips creators up, especially when it gets to the middle of the Kickstarter campaign, the dead zone, where they're like they might be posting or they might be tweeting, and it just doesn't seem to be giving that same return. Well, the mindset that you want to have is that, if it is true that someone needs to see something 7, 8, 9, 12 times before they're ready to even investigate further or even recognize that it's there. Well, what you're doing in that difficult middle time is just adding another one, adding another thing to the scale will eventually tip some people over. So
Right.
it's not wasted effort. It's not working. It's a part of building your promotional mix and your promotional campaign.
I agree 100%. Yep. Definitely.
Well, this is awesome, Brian. I excited for you and the launch and the plan going forward to be more consistent with what you're putting out on Kickstarter, along with the stuff that's coming out through your publisher partners. Do you have one final piece of advice, maybe for the creator out there that is maybe doing their creator-owned thing, but would like to add freelancing for other publishers on other publishers' IP to their mix? Like, any piece of advice for a writer like in their shoes?
Absolutely. To definitely, to put yourself out there, to build any kind of portfolio you can. I'm not saying it has to be extensive, but have like some samples, some Dropbox link or something to work that you've done, or you've maybe, it hasn't been out anywhere, but you have done it, just for the credence. And I would definitely say jump on Upwork. I'm a huge fan of Upwork, a proponent of it. Like, it's really where I really began freelancing. And there were so many opportunities there for even ghostwriting, which, you don't get the credit for it, but you get the experience. And of course you also get paid for it. And getting feedback from another creator who is reading your work that's paying you, saying, "Oh, this is exactly what I wanted," or, "Hey, could you tweak this?" It's a great learning curve, and it's great for the process of crafting and creating. So I would say jump on Upwork and just get your feet wet and build, your freelance career, the beginning of it through Upwork.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I know America's Kingdom will be running for the next 19 days or so. But besides this series, what has you the most excited heading into the new year, 2023?
So I'm working on another series with Aftershock. I'm 2 issues away from being done. I'm really excited about that series. I'm excited about the Vineyard finally wrapping up and what we potentially could do next with that. But beyond that, the 2 things that are, I'm connected to an artist, Anthony Pugh, and he and I are working on a sci-fi horror that's probably no one will see until maybe late 2023, next fall, probably like this time next year. But that's something that I want to release independently. So we're kind of taking our time with it. And I even got to meet him in New York. So we actually met, and it's rare that you get to meet the people that you work with, right? Like in person. But I got to meet him, and we are slowly building into that, and we're having great conversations about that. And of course, America's Kingdom. The plan here with America's Kingdom is to, I want to get the whole first arc out by next fall. With the time frame, hopefully, it's 6 issues. What I want to do is, I want to do another 3 issue 3 and 4 together. We'll see how that works to kind of group them like that, 3 and 4, and then 5 and 6. So I'm excited about telling this story completely, and then potentially going into a volume 2 for 2024.
Awesome. And besides the Kickstarter, what's the best way for listeners to connect with you?
I'm on Twitter a lot at Brian Hawkins, at Brian L. Hawkins, and on IG, Brian Hawkins Writes. My Substack is Brian Hawkins Writes .substack.com, and the website BrianHawkinsWrites.com. There's a theme there.
There's a theme. Yeah, it's consistent. Makes it easy for me to share up all those links, which I will do.
I appreciate that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Brian, and sharing your insights. And best of
Thank
luck
you.
with this series and everything else you're up to.
I definitely appreciate it, Tyler. You have been awesome and instrumental in me continuing to build my career in this particular part of it. So I definitely appreciate you.
Awesome. I appreciate you, my friend. Take care.
All right.